This is Antergos 18.8. It's based on Arch Linux with a preconfigured desktop. Actually, you can choose from 6 preconfigured desktops. There's been a proliferation of Arch-based distributions lately. I think I've counted 21, but I've had the best luck with Antergos. Now, 18.8 is a point release. This is a rolling release. There was another point release a couple of months ago, 18.6. There'll be another one in a couple of months from now. The advantage of having these point releases is that if you do have to reinstall your system for some reason, you don't have to go through all of the updates since you first installed it. You can get a fairly recent snapshot with the latest updates. I'm going to show how to install this, but first I want to mention a few things. You can get it on the Antergos website, and this is the download page. There are two versions, a live ISO and a minimal ISO. Now, I tried the minimal ISO, and the installation failed. It's very much like the live ISO, except that it has a more minimal live image, and more of the software is downloaded. And I believe the reason the installation failed is that some of the software failed to download properly. Otherwise, the installation is almost identical. Both of the install images include an easy-to-use GUI installer, and both of them include the option for having 6 desktops. So I'm going to cover the installation next, and then I'm going to come back to this installation on an external hard drive. This is the installation in a virtual machine. You want to point to Start Antergos Live and press Enter. It's loading the Linux kernel. Now I'm going to cut out all of the dead space, or most of it. And GNOME 3 desktop opens. It's checking for available updates, so you want to make sure you're connected to the internet. You're not supposed to install this if you're not connected to the internet. Check was successful, so I'm going to click on the Xfce installer. And I'm going to click on Install It. The installation language is English. I'm going to click on the arrow to go forward. Now it meets all of the requirements for installation. So I'm going to go forward. Now English US is not at the top, it's third from the bottom here. This is in alphabetical order. Go forward. It correctly identifies my location, Chicago, United States. Go forward. English US is the keyboard. I have a choice of several desktops. The base, Cinnamon, Deepin, GNOME, KDE, Mate, OpenBox, Xfce. The default is GNOME, but I'm going to choose Xfce and then go forward. Now I suggest checking Show Advanced Features at the bottom here before you do any of this, so you can see all the choices. I'm going to add the Arch user repository. I'm going to skip Bluetooth. I'm going to change from Chromium to Firefox as the default browser. I'm going to install the Flash plugins. I'm going to install the long-term support version of the kernel, which is 4.14 instead of 4.17. I'm going to install LibreOffice. I'm going to skip SSH and Steam and play on Linux. I'm going to install the uncomplicated firewall and then go forward, and it explains what the uncomplicated firewall does by default. I'm going to close that. It explains the limitations of the Arch user repository. I understand, but I need it to do the things that I usually do. Now I'm going to let Xfce choose the mirrors, because I don't have any better way of making a judgment about the best mirrors. Now here I have a choice of erasing the disk and installing Antergos. Of course I could do this in a virtual machine, but I never do it in reality. So I'm going to choose exactly where Antergos should be installed. Now Xfce is ranking the mirrors. Since this is a virtual machine, I only have one disk, and that's device SDA. But there's no file system installed, so I don't show any free space. So the first thing I have to do is install a new partition table, and I'm going to use the MS-DOS type. Since I'm using a legacy BIOS to install the system, if I were using EFI, I might use the GPT partition table. I'm going to click on Apply. Now I'll go to Free Space, click on New, and I have about 34,000 megabytes. I'm going to use about 32,000 of those for my root partition. Now it's already checked as a primary, beginning of the space, and ext4. I'm going to mount it at root / and then click on Apply, and that partition is made. Now I'm going to click on the remaining free space. It's about 2 gigabytes, and I'm going to change that to swap, and then click on Apply. Now I only have one choice for the bootloader, and that's SDA, which is the virtual disk, so I'm going to leave it there and go forward, and here's the summary of what I'm going to get. If I scroll down, I can see the partitions that are going to be created. Am I ready to go? Yes, click on Yes. Now at this point I'm going to go back and show the installation on an actual external drive. These are some screenshots showing installation on an external drive, and the only thing that's different basically is the partitioning. So I'm going back to the installation type, and as before I'm going to choose exactly where Antergos should be installed. And now you see I have, in addition to device SDA, which is my internal drive, I have device SDC, which is my external target drive. Now this installer does not show device SDB, which is the USB stick I'm using for installation. This external drive already has things on it. Partition SDC1 is already formatted for ext4, and I have another system installed on that, and device SDC2 is swap. But I have quite a bit of free space. First I'm going down to the bottom where it says use the device below for bootloader installation. And I'm going to click on the drop-down menu and choose my external drive, device SDC. Now I'm going to go to the free space, and I'm going to click on New. There's one design flaw in this system that I want to point out. Where it shows size, there's only room for about 4 digits, whereas in this case there are actually 6 digits in this number. There's plenty of space in this dialog box for a larger window to show more digits. So I think that's one thing they could change. But anyway, it shows all the space I have left on the drive. I'm going to change that number to 160,000, and I'm going to mount it at /, which is root. It already shows a primary partition location at the beginning of this space, and it already shows as ext4. So with all of that done, I'm going to click on Apply. Now, as you can see, my new root partition has appeared, 160 gigabytes. I'm going to go to free space again, click on New again. Now, this is my fourth partition, and with the MS-DOS type of partition table, you're only able to install 4 primary partitions. So I'm going to make this an extended partition. That way I can put additional logical partitions if I want. If I were to make this a primary partition, I would never be able to add anything else to the drive. So it's an extended partition, and it's the size of the remaining free space on the drive. So I'm going to click on Apply. Now you can see my extended partition has been installed on device SDC4, and I'm going to click on free space again, click on New again, and this is going to be a logical partition. The first thing I'm going to do is change the size to 4096 megabytes, which is 4 gigabytes, roughly the size of my random access memory. Now where it says Use as ext4, I'm going to change that to swap. And then I'm going to click on Apply. So this is the installation summary. Now under partitions, you have to scroll down to see everything. And device SDC3 will be created, not relabeled, formatted, mounted as root, and not encrypted. Device SDC4 will be created, not relabeled, not formatted, not mounted, and not encrypted. That's the extended partition that holds the logical partitions. Device SDC5 will be created, not relabeled, formatted, mounted as swap, and not encrypted. So I'm going to click on the arrow to proceed. And it says, are you really sure you want to continue? And I'm going to click on Yes. Now I'm back in the virtual demonstration. I'm going to enter my name. I can use caps if I want. It's XRAM Tech. I'm going to call my computer XRAM Tech PC. If you're using a network, you should have this computer named as the network expects it to be, but I'm not using a network, so it really doesn't matter what I call it. I'm going to pick a username, and I'm going to call it XRAM Tech in lowercase. It doesn't have to be the same. It can be anything you want. I'm going to choose a password. I'm going to confirm the password. I'm going to leave unchecked Show Password and Log In Automatically, and I'm going to leave checked Require my password to log in. And then click on Save. Now I'm going to edit out about 36 minutes of installation. It took a long time because it's in a virtual machine and I'm using a screen recorder. So now it's almost finished. It says, do you want to restart your system now? Yes, I do. So when you remove your installation medium and it reboots, you can go into Antergos Linux. And again, I'm going to edit out all of the dead space. So this is the login screen. You may see that the time is twitching there. You left click on that. and you get your username so you can enter your password. Click on the little Submit Password symbol. So now you're in the Xfce desktop. There's the menu the way it first appeared. But I'm not going to use this. I'm going to close this and go back to my actual installation on my external hard drive. Right now we're back on my actual installation, and this little update symbol is turned orange, so I'm going to click on that. And it's checking for updates, and it has found 90 updates. So I'm going to say select all and apply. Now it wants my password. Click on Authenticate. It's downloading things. I can click on Details. It says transaction successfully finished. So I can close this. This is basically the way it looked by default. I haven't changed much. One thing I did change is the whisker menu. I put the categories on the left. They were on the right by default. And I also increased the size of it. Something that's very easy to do with the whisker menu. I've gone over this before, but let me just briefly show how I switch the categories around. I right-click on the symbol here and then left-click on Properties. Here under Appearance, I unchecked Show Generic Application Names. I left-checked Show Category Names. I unchecked Show Application Descriptions. It just takes up space in the menu, but it may be useful if you're just starting out. I left-checked Show Application Tooltips, and I left unchecked Show Menu Hierarchy. Under Behavior, I checked Switch Categories by hovering, position Search Entry next to Panel button, position Commands next to Search Entry, and position Categories next to Panel button. And I left-checked Include Favorites. So that gave me this panel. Now I'm going to start off with accessories here. You have the Application Finder, Archive Manager, Bulk Rename, Calculator, Catfish File Search, GNOME Disks, HP Device Manager, Mousepad, Screenshot, Task Manager, Thunar File Manager, and Xfce Burn. Under Education, you have LibreOffice Math. Under Graphics, you have the Document Viewer, LibreOffice Draw, and Ristretto Image Viewer. Under Internet, you have Avahi SSH Server Browser, Avahi VNC Server Browser, Firefox, and Transmission. Under Multimedia, you have the Parole Media Player, that came by default. Praha Music Manager. Pulse Audio Volume Control was there by default. The Qt V4L2 Test Utility. Simple Screen Recorder I installed from the repository. VLC Media Player I installed from the repository. And again, Xfce Burn. That showed up also under Accessories. Under Office, you have Document Viewer, and you have the complete LibreOffice suite. Under Settings, you have Accessibility, Add Remove Software, which is PAMAC, Adobe Flash Player, Appearance, Desktop, Display, File Manager, Keyboard, Light Locker Settings, MIME Type Editor, Mouse and Touchpad, Network Connections, Notifications, Panel, Power Manager, Preferred Applications, Print Settings, Qt 5 Settings, Removable Drives and Media. Now I have to scroll down here. Session and Startup, Settings Editor, Settings Manager, Software Update, Window Manager Tweaks, Workspaces, and the Xfce Terminal. Under System, you have Add Remove Software again, Avahi ZeroConf Browser, Bulk Rename, Dconf Editor, HTOP, Manage Printing, Print Settings, Software Update, Task Manager, Thunar File Manager, and Xfce Terminal. Now I want to go into Add Remove Software in a little more detail. This is PAMAC, the GUI front end for Pacman, the Arch Package Manager. And when you get an Arch-based distribution, you usually get PAMAC with the GTK-based distributions and Octopi with the Qt-based distributions. That's because PAMAC uses GTK and Octopi uses Qt. First thing I did is I left-click on this menu symbol here, and I went down to Preferences. Now it wants authentication. Click on Authenticate. I left this general category more or less as it was. It wants to check available disk space and check for updates. Under AUR, this is the Arch user repository, which contains some risky applications. So it says Enable AUR support. That was originally off. I clicked it on. And then I check for updates from the AUR. I left the build directory as TMP. So I've enabled the AUR. Under cache, I left everything the way it was. Number of versions of each package to keep in the cache, 3. And I left unchecked remove only the versions of uninstalled packages. I may revisit that. So that's the preferences. Now under categories, I could limit the display to audio and video development, education, etc. I'm not going to do that. Under groups, I've got different groups. Integrated Development Environment, ALSA, Antergos Base development, etc. Those are groups. Under repositories, it lists the Antergos repository, the core repository, which is the Arch core repository, the Arch extra repository, the Arch community repository, and the multilib repository. Under installed, it of course shows the installed applications. Also, you could show explicitly installed orphans and foreign. Under updates, I've already done updates, so it's up to date. And there's nothing under pending yet. As I say, I installed Simple Screen Recorder this way. I'll just look for it. And it's there. It happens to be in the community repository. Since it's already installed, I'm not going to install it again. In one of my recent videos, I did a video on how to install PyRenamer in Ubuntu 18.04. PyRenamer is a bulk file renamer that allows me to use metadata from music and image files, and it really hasn't been maintained for a few years, and it dropped out of the Ubuntu 18.04 repositories. So I want to see if it's still available in this Arch-based distribution. So I click on the magnifying glass and enter PyRenamer and press enter. And there it is, and as you can see, it's in the AUR. So if I click on this, I then right-click and left-click on Install. It says one pending operation. I'm going to click on Apply. This shows you the transaction summary. I'm going to click on Commit. I'm going to click on Details. And it's successfully installed, a lot easier than installing it with Ubuntu 18.04. Let me just see if it's there. And yes, it is. I'm not going to use it now, but it's been installed. Now if I right-click on the desktop and go to Desktop Settings, I have a choice of different backgrounds. This is the one it came with. I like it. These are fairly common backgrounds, but if I wanted to use any of these others, of course, it would be easy to do it. Etc. Now if I go over here to icons, if I wanted to get rid of these default icons here, I could simply uncheck them. And I usually do that. Of course, you expect the latest software in any Arch-based distribution, and this is it. Just about the latest at any rate, Firefox Quantum version 61.0.1, LibreOffice version 6.0.6.2. Now I haven't installed GIMP yet, but as you can see from this screenshot of PAMAC, it's going to be version 2.10.4-2. Likewise, MuseScore is going to be 2.3.1-1. And Kdenlive is going to be version 18.04.3-1. Regarding memory use, I took this snapshot of HTOP with only HTOP itself running. the screenshot utility, of course, and the desktop, and it's using 474 megabytes of random access memory. That makes this a medium weight distribution as you would expect for Xfce. Now, another way to go to settings, instead of going through all those menus, is just click on this symbol in the whisker menu, and here's all the settings, or at least most of them. Under Appearance, you notice it has the Numix Frost style. Now, Numix is a sponsor of Antergos, so I suppose it's only natural that Antergos should favor the Numix icons and Numix themes. But if you don't like them, you can always change them. I happen to like them, so I'm going to leave them the way they are. Those are the themes. You have the usual huge collection of Xfce themes. And under icons, these are Numix Square. You also have Numix Square Light, Numix High Contrast, GNOME, and Adwaita. So take your pick. I'm going to leave Numix Square. Under fonts, it defaults to Contrarel number 10. That's fairly common with Linux distributions. And under settings, I'm not going to change these. So that's the settings dialog box if you want to access your settings that way. So at this point, I'm quite pleased with Antergos 18.8 Xfce. I think I've had better luck with Antergos than any other Arch-based distribution. But of course, the proof is always in the long-term pudding, and I haven't really used it long enough to know if it will eventually crash or if I eventually have to reinstall it because of some conflict with the updates. But I haven't had any of the initial difficulties that I've had with most other Arch-based distributions. This is XRAM Tech. Thanks for watching.